Friends, if you want to watch the super hit movie Clown in a Cornfield in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more detailed movie breakdowns and reviews. In today's video, we're going to talk about a film that has become one of the most talked about horror thrillers in recent years, Clown in a Cornfield. We'll explore what this movie is all about, where you can watch it, and all the behind-the-scenes facts that make it such a standout entry in the slasher genre. I will guide you through the technical departments, including cinematography, sound design, editing, pre-production, filming process, post-production, music composition, and of course, the film's budget and box office performance. By the end, you'll also get a concise overview of the story and a short review covering the strengths and weaknesses of the plot. Clown in a Cornfield is based on the hit novel written by Adam Cesare, a story that blends classic small-town horror with modern social commentary. The movie centers on a young girl who moves to a quiet town only to discover that a series of horrifying murders begin to unfold, all seemingly connected to a creepy clown mascot that has become a local legend. What starts as a light-hearted town celebration soon turns into a blood-soaked nightmare as secrets are revealed and the townspeople face their darkest fears. The movie captures the essence of teenage survival horror, combining suspenseful pacing with shocking twists that keep audiences on the edge of their seats. From a production standpoint, Clown in a Cornfield demonstrates how independent horror can deliver high-quality scares without a massive studio budget. The cinematography uses moody lighting, deep shadows, and eerie cornfield visuals to build tension effectively. The production team relied heavily on practical effects to achieve a realistic feel during intense sequences, which helps ground the story in a believable environment. The use of real rural locations gives the film an authentic texture, while the art direction emphasizes the small-town Americana atmosphere mixed with sinister undertones. The sound design and musical score are vital elements that contribute to the unsettling tone. The music alternates between subtle ambient sounds and sudden bursts of intensity that match the pacing of the chase and kill scenes. Every scream, rustle of corn, and clown laugh is carefully mixed to heighten the fear factor. The editing maintains a brisk pace, ensuring that each scare lands effectively without overstaying its welcome. The balance between quiet suspense and sudden horror moments reflects expert timing and understanding of the genre. During pre-production, the filmmakers focused on staying true to the source material while adding visual depth and emotional realism. Casting was handled thoughtfully, with actors chosen not only for their talent but also for how naturally they fit into the setting. The filming process was completed mostly on location in rural areas, where cornfields became both a scenic and terrifying backdrop. Post-production work emphasized enhancing the film's color grading, giving it that dark and gritty tone often seen in modern horror cinema. When it comes to performances, the cast of Clown in a Cornfield deserves special mention. The lead actress delivers a convincing portrayal of a determined yet vulnerable teenager caught in an escalating nightmare. Supporting actors play their roles with authenticity, making the audience care about who lives or dies. The antagonist, the clown figure, is portrayed with a chilling stillness that makes every appearance frightening. The character design of the clown, with its traditional yet menacing makeup, adds to the horror iconography that horror fans love. In terms of budget and box office, Clown in a Cornfield managed to achieve an impressive return on investment. Despite being a mid-budget production, it performed strongly with both critics and audiences, especially among horror enthusiasts looking for fresh yet nostalgic scares. Its success proves that strong storytelling, atmospheric direction, and solid performances can compete with big-budget horror releases. Overall, Clown in a Cornfield offers a mix of classic slasher thrills and modern-day relevance. The plot cleverly mirrors real societal themes such as generational conflict and the fear of change within small communities. While it delivers plenty of gore and shock value, it also provides a narrative with emotional weight. The direction, editing, and production values come together to create a horror experience that feels both old school and contemporary. In this video, we'll explore all these aspects in detail, from how the movie was made to why it resonated so well with horror fans across the USA. Stay tuned till the end to get the complete breakdown of Clown in a Cornfield, including where to watch it and what makes it one of the standout horror movies of the decade. Clown in a Cornfield is a 2025 American slasher film directed by Eli Craig and adapted from Adam Cesare's 2020 novel. The movie delivers a chilling blend of small-town horror, teenage rebellion, and social commentary wrapped inside a violent, fast-paced thriller. It stars Katie Douglas as Quinn Maybrook, a teenager who moves with her father Glenn, played by Aaron Abrams, to the fading town of Kettle Springs. Other main cast members include Carson McCormick as Cole, Cassandra Potenza as Janet, Alexander Martin Deacon as Matt, Verity Marks as Ronnie, Ao Solank as Tucker, and Vincent Muller as Rust. Kevin Durand appears as the town's controlling mayor Arthur Hill, and Will Sasso plays the morally conflicted Sheriff Dunn. The story begins with a haunting prologue set in 1991 when two teenagers are mysteriously killed near the Old Bay Pen corn syrup factory by someone dressed as the town's mascot, Frendo the Clown. This gruesome incident becomes a dark legend that still hangs over the town decades later. Fast forward to the present, Quinn and her father arrive in Kettle Springs for a fresh start after her mother's death. Glenn takes a new position as the town doctor, while Quinn tries to fit into her new school and make friends among a group of teenagers who seem restless and disillusioned. Kettle Springs is a town divided. The older generation longs for the good old days, blaming the youth for the town's decline, while the younger crowd feels suffocated by outdated rules and hypocrisy. Quinn quickly learns that the tension between the town's adults and teenagers runs deep, but no one could imagine how deadly it will soon become. The town's mascot, Frendo the Clown, originally created to promote the Bay Pen corn syrup factory, starts reappearing, only this time, the smiling face hides a murderous intent. When Quinn and her friends attend a wild party outside town limits, the celebration turns into a nightmare. A killer dressed as Frendo crashes the party, hunting down teens one by one in a series of brutal high-tension attacks. Panic spreads as the surviving teens try to escape through dark cornfields and abandoned barns, but the line between safety and danger blurs as even familiar faces prove untrustworthy. Each death scene builds suspense and terror, as the once sleepy town descends into chaos. As the story unfolds, it becomes clear that the murders are not random acts of violence. Quinn starts to uncover a disturbing truth. The killings are part of a larger plot orchestrated by some of the town's powerful figures. The adults, desperate to restore Kettle Springs' image and control the younger generation, have turned to deadly methods. They see the killings as a form of cleansing, a way to fix the town by getting rid of what they believe is wrong with the youth. The Frendo mask becomes a symbol of this twisted moral crusade. In the gripping final act, Quinn, along with the few remaining survivors, is lured to the Old Bay Pen factory. Here, the truth comes fully to light as she confronts the people responsible for the massacre. The factory, once a place of pride, now serves as the stage for a showdown that exposes the darkness beneath the town's smiling facade. Glenn arrives in time to help his daughter, and together they fight back against the killers in a blood-soaked climax filled with tension, violence, and emotional weight. By the film's end, the surviving characters face not only the trauma of what they've endured, but also the haunting realization that evil can hide behind the most familiar faces. The story closes with Quinn finding a music box featuring the Frendo mascot, hinting that the horror may not be entirely over. Clown in a Cornfield succeeds as both a modern slasher and a reflection of real-world generational divides. The movie uses the imagery of small-town decay, teenage rebellion, and mob mentality to comment on how fear and nostalgia can turn deadly. Katie Douglas delivers a strong, emotionally grounded performance, while Kevin Durand and Will Sasso provide intensity and complexity to their roles. The film balances practical gore with genuine suspense, maintaining a fast pace and strong atmosphere throughout. In short, Clown in a Cornfield is a tense, brutal, and thought-provoking horror film that redefines the killer clown trope. It combines sharp direction, strong performances, and a layered story to create one of the standout slasher movies of the decade. The narrative of Clown in a Cornfield unfolds like a modern slasher with a social pulse, using a familiar small-town setup to build both dread and commentary. The story opens with an eerie prologue set years before the main events, showing two teenagers being stalked and murdered near the Bay Pen corn syrup factory by a figure dressed as Frendo the Clown. This sequence immediately sets the tone, introducing the film's iconic mask, the sinister setting of the cornfields, and the deep-rooted darkness within Kettle Springs. From its first frame, the film signals that this is not just about a killer clown, it's about what the clown represents for a town in decay. The setup begins as Quinn Maybrook, played by Katie Douglas, and her father Glenn, portrayed by Aaron Abrams, moved to Kettle Springs for a fresh start after her mother's death. The early scenes establish the divide between generations. The adults mourn their town's lost glory, blaming the youth for being careless, disrespectful, and obsessed with technology. Meanwhile, the teenagers see the adults as hypocrites unwilling to let go of the past. This generational conflict quietly drives the emotional core of the movie and foreshadows the moral justification behind the chaos that follows. The inciting incident occurs when Quinn attends her first high school event and meets a group of local teens including Cole, Janet, Matt, Ronnie, Tucker, and Rust. She quickly learns about the old factory and the legend of Frendo, the clown mascot that once symbolized the town's prosperity. During a party thrown by her new friends at the edge of the cornfield, tension simmers between the teens and some older townsfolk who crash the gathering, warning them to show respect. The party spirals out of control when a masked killer wearing the Frendo costume attacks, brutally murdering several partygoers. This shocking sequence transforms the film from a teenage drama into a full-blown survival horror, marking the clear shift from setup to rising action. The rising action sees Quinn and her remaining friends running for their lives through the endless cornfields and abandoned buildings as the body count increases. The film uses these chases to reveal key emotional moments: Quinn proving her courage, friendships fracturing under pressure, and hidden motives coming to light. Sheriff Dunn, played by Will Sasso, begins an investigation that seems more focused on controlling information than finding the truth, hinting at deeper corruption. Meanwhile, the adults of Kettle Springs grow increasingly suspicious, forming vigilante groups under the guise of protecting the town. Midway through the film, a major turning point shifts the audience's understanding of what's happening. Quinn discovers evidence suggesting that the murders might not be the work of a single deranged killer but part of a coordinated plan. The revelation that multiple townspeople have donned the Frendo mask reframes the story, transforming it from a standard slasher into a commentary on mob mentality and generational conflict. The narrative maintains a mostly linear structure, but through intercut flashbacks and confessions, we gradually see how the town's decline and the adults' resentment of the younger generation led them to create this violent cleansing. The tension peaks in a sequence where Quinn and Cole are trapped inside the old Bay Pen factory, surrounded by killers. This portion of the film is the emotional and thematic climax, combining action with revelation. Quinn learns that the town's leaders orchestrated the massacre to restore Kettle Springs' image, blaming teenagers for moral decay. Her father Glenn intervenes, and together they fight to expose the truth. The visual storytelling in this section, flickering factory lights, echoing corridors, and shifting shadows, reflects both the physical danger and the symbolic collapse of the town's illusions. As the finale unfolds, the remaining survivors confront the main conspirators in a violent showdown. The masked Frendos fall one by one until the last remaining figure is unmasked, revealing a familiar authority figure who saw murder as a justified solution. Quinn's final act, defending herself and rejecting the corrupt town's values, serves as the emotional resolution. The ending closes with calm after chaos, but a subtle note of unease lingers when Quinn discovers a small music box playing the Bay Pen jingle, suggesting that the spirit of Frendo still haunts Kettle Springs. Narratively, Clown in a Cornfield structure is tight and deliberate. Its linear timeline helps keep tension clear and sustained, while selective flashbacks and slow reveals add psychological depth. The pacing alternates between quiet build-up and explosive violence, allowing viewers to breathe just long enough before the next shock. The film's emotional peaks are grounded in Quinn's journey from grief and confusion to empowerment and survival. Her story represents not just a fight against killers, but a rebellion against the oppressive ideals of a dying community. By the end, Clown in a Cornfield has taken audiences on a complete emotional arc, from curiosity to fear, from outrage to catharsis. The narrative choices create a balance between horror entertainment and thematic reflection. Each major turn advances both the plot and the message, making it a slasher that's as much about what's happening inside the town's soul as what's happening in the cornfield. Clown in a Cornfield is built around characters whose personal conflicts mirror the broader social divide in Kettle Springs. Each character represents a piece of the larger tension between youth and authority, progress and nostalgia, life and decay. The film uses these individuals not just as victims or villains, but as reflections of the fractured community they inhabit. By the end, every major character either evolves or is consumed by their inability to change. The protagonist, Quinn Maybrook, played by Katie Douglas, begins the movie as an outsider looking for peace. Having recently lost her mother, she carries the quiet weight of grief and uncertainty. Moving to Kettle Springs with her father Glenn represents a chance to start over, but her arrival places her directly in the middle of the town's generational war. At the beginning, Quinn's goal is simple: fit in, make friends, and adjust to her new life. However, she is soon forced into a role she never expected, that of a survivor and truth seeker. The film subtly tracks her transformation through small gestures, her hesitant smile at new friends, her protective instincts during the first attack, and her eventual willingness to stand up to authority figures. Her arc moves from vulnerability to empowerment, showing that survival in this world requires both courage and moral clarity. Quinn Maybrook, portrayed by Aaron Abrams, serves as both emotional anchor and moral compass. As a father trying to rebuild his and his daughter's lives, he represents rational adulthood in a town overcome by hysteria. Glenn's calm demeanor contrasts sharply with the paranoia of other adults. His love for Quinn drives him to intervene during the chaos, risking his life to protect her. Throughout the film, he transitions from passive observer to active participant, realizing that silence in the face of corruption is as dangerous as violence itself. His relationship with Quinn forms the film's emotional backbone, showing how love and integrity can survive even in horror. The film's antagonist, embodied in the masked Frendos and ultimately revealed as several townspeople led by Mayor Arthur Hill, played by Kevin Durand, symbolizes the collective fear of change. The mayor's public persona is one of civic pride, but his hidden motive is control. He believes the youth have ruined Kettle Springs and that eradicating them is a form of salvation. The clown mask becomes a metaphor for moral hypocrisy, a smiling face hiding corruption and hatred. The mayor's downfall represents the collapse of outdated ideals, a man so consumed by nostalgia that he becomes a monster in the process. His character doesn't grow, instead, he regresses, clinging to delusion until it destroys him. Sheriff Dunn, portrayed by Will Sasso, adds complexity to the adult faction. Initially, he appears complicit in the conspiracy, enforcing silence and order. However, subtle moments, a hesitant glance, a softened tone, suggest he is torn between duty and conscience. By the film's later stages, Dunn's internal conflict becomes evident, making him a tragic figure who realizes too late that following orders has consequences. His death serves as both punishment and redemption, highlighting how moral compromise leads to ruin. Among the younger characters, Cole, played by Carson McCormick, is Quinn's closest ally. He begins as a rebellious prankster but grows into a symbol of defiance and loyalty. His easy humor masks a deep resentment toward the town's hypocrisy. Through his interactions with Quinn, we see a shift from careless teenager to someone willing to fight for what's right. His fate, standing his ground against impossible odds, cements his transformation from immature sidekick to hero in his own right. Janet, Matt, Ronnie, Tucker, and Rust each contribute distinct emotional beats that reveal how fear exposes true character. Janet, played by Cassandra Potenza, starts as cynical and detached but shows unexpected bravery during the attack sequences. Matt, portrayed by Alexander Martin Deacon, represents the voice of reason among his peers, and his loss midway through the film underscores the emotional stakes. Ronnie and Tucker serve as the story's cautionary examples, their arrogance and disbelief leading to their downfall. These supporting roles may appear secondary, but their choices shape Quinn's growth, forcing her to face both the fragility of friendship and the brutality of survival. The character development is not only about survival but also about revelation. Every major relationship, between father and daughter, friend and friend, authority and youth, acts as a test of integrity. The film uses gestures more than dialogue to express change. Quinn's trembling hands steady as she confronts danger. Glenn's posture shifts from defensive to protective. Cole's smirk fades into grim determination. Even the villains display subtle cues of insecurity before the mask comes off, revealing the fear behind their violence. By the end, Quinn has transformed from a grieving outsider into a determined survivor who sees through the lies of her community. Her strength is not born from rage but from resilience. Glenn emerges as the voice of moral clarity, while the older generation's leaders are consumed by their own corruption. The town's youth, once dismissed as reckless, proved to be its only hope for renewal. In Clown in a Cornfield, character development serves as the emotional engine driving the horror. The fear is real, the deaths are shocking, but what gives the film its lasting power is watching people evolve, or fail to, under pressure. Each character reflects a different response to fear: denial, aggression, compassion, or courage. Through these arcs, the movie delivers more than bloodshed. It offers a study in how identity, morality, and truth emerge when the masks finally fall away. Performances are the heartbeat of Clown in a Cornfield, elevating what could have been a conventional slasher into a character-driven horror experience. The cast commits fully to the film's mixture of realism, tension, and social critique, with some actors disappearing so completely into their roles that it becomes hard to separate performance from persona. Every scream, hesitation, and glance carries emotional intent, and while a few moments feel uneven, the ensemble overall delivers a raw, authentic energy that holds the audience from beginning to end. Katie Douglas, as Quinn Maybrook, anchors the entire film with a performance that is both restrained and deeply affecting. From her first scene, Douglas captures Quinn's quiet grief and underlying strength without overstating emotion. Her body language is precise, shoulders slightly hunched from emotional weight, eyes scanning for safety even in mundane moments, which makes her eventual transformation into a resilient survivor feel organic. She brings humanity to what could have been a stock, final girl archetype. The way she modulates her voice across the film, soft and uncertain early on, then firm and steady by the climax, illustrates her evolution with nuance. One standout moment comes when Quinn confronts the masked killer in the factory. Her trembling but defiant tone turns fear into defiance, and Douglas makes the audience feel both terror and empowerment in the same breath. Aaron Abrams, as Quinn's father Glenn Maybrook, provides emotional grounding. His calm, thoughtful demeanor contrasts with the town's hysteria, making every outburst or desperate plea from him hit harder. Abrams delivers his lines with natural cadence, giving Glenn a believable moral authority without slipping into cliché. His quiet moments, comforting Quinn, observing the townsfolk, or realizing the conspiracy, show a seasoned actor relying on stillness rather than melodrama. In the final act, when Glenn risks his life to save his daughter, Abrams captures the panic and parental instinct in a way that feels painfully real, transforming a simple rescue scene into a moment of raw emotional payoff. Kevin Durand, portraying Mayor Arthur Hill, brings commanding menace to the role. He delivers the film's ideological weight with unnerving conviction, embodying a man corrupted by nostalgia and control. Durand's physicality is one of the film's great assets. Even when silent, his posture and facial expressions convey moral rot. When he finally reveals his motives, his voice is eerily calm, making his twisted reasoning sound almost rational. That chilling composure makes him more disturbing than any masked killer could be. His performance is precise and layered, turning what could have been a cartoonish villain into a frighteningly believable one. Will Sasso surprises as Sheriff Dunn, breaking away from his usual comedic background to play a conflicted authority figure. His performance is understated but effective. His hesitations, nervous glances, and subtle shifts in tone communicate internal struggle. The sheriff's breakdown late in the film, when he realizes the depth of the conspiracy, is one of Sasso's strongest dramatic moments, revealing guilt beneath his uniform. Though his screen time is limited, his performance leaves a lasting impression, giving complexity to a role that might otherwise have been one-dimensional. Carson McCormick, as Cole, infuses the film with youthful energy and authenticity. His chemistry with Katie Douglas gives the story emotional texture beyond horror tropes. The playful banter between Cole and Quinn in early scenes feels effortless, setting up a believable bond that adds weight to their later moments of fear and loss. McCormick handles humor and panic with equal ease. His transition from mischievous teen to desperate survivor is one of the film's more emotionally satisfying arcs. His final stand, filled with both bravery and exhaustion, lingers because it feels like the culmination of real growth rather than scripted heroics. Among the supporting cast, Cassandra Potenza as Janet delivers a sharp and emotionally grounded performance. Her dry wit and emotional intelligence make her more than just a side character. In scenes where panic sets in, Potenza resists overacting, instead letting fear register through small physical cues, a shaking hand, a whisper that falters mid-word. Alexander Martin Deacon as Matt brings a quiet sincerity, his rational demeanor acting as a counterbalance to the chaos. His death scene, understated yet devastating, demonstrates the actor's ability to evoke sympathy in minimal screen time. The ensemble's strength lies in their chemistry. The teen cast feels like a real group of friends, awkward, competitive, but ultimately loyal. Their overlapping dialogue and natural reactions during group scenes suggest careful direction paired with actors comfortable improvising within emotional truth. This authenticity makes the horror sequences more impactful. The deaths sting not just because they are brutal, but because the performers make us believe in the friendships behind them. Where the performances occasionally falter is in pacing and intensity. A few secondary adults veer into caricature, delivering lines too broadly, especially during town hall or crowd scenes. However, these moments are brief and rarely distract from the central performances. If anything, their theatricality enhances the film's underlying critique of mob mentality. The film's strongest acting moments come when silence replaces dialogue. Douglas's exhausted breathing as she hides in the cornfield, Abrams's steadying voice breaking for the first time, and Durand's quiet, venomous stare, all transform written beats into living emotion. Timing and restraint are the cast's shared strengths. Even in chaos, performances feel rooted in truth. Ultimately, the success of Clown in a Cornfield's performances lies in their authenticity. The actors treat the material seriously, elevating the film from standard genre fare into something emotionally resonant. Each performer, whether leading or supporting, contributes a distinct texture to the movie's tension, and together they turn a story about masks and violence into a chilling reflection of fear, morality, and survival. The direction of Clown in a Cornfield demonstrates a calculated blend of slasher genre tradition and modern cinematic sensibilities, driven by the filmmaker's ability to balance suspense, tension, and small-town realism. The director, Eli Craig, approaches the story with a sharp understanding of how horror works best when grounded in relatable characters and an identifiable setting. From the opening shot, which establishes the uneasy quiet of Kettle Springs, Missouri, Craig uses visual storytelling to immerse viewers in the town's decaying heart. His approach is not about shock for its own sake, but about building dread through pacing, camera composition, and atmosphere. Each frame feels intentional, with a slow burn that draws audiences deeper into the fear. The pacing of Clown in a Cornfield is a crucial element of its success. Rather than racing into violence, Craig allows the tension to simmer. The first act spends time developing the new girl Quinn Maybrook, her relationship with her father, and the uneasy dynamics between the town's older generation and the rebellious youth. This slower start pays off later when the film explodes into chaos, making the violence feel more shocking and earned. The director manages transitions between quiet dread and high-energy chase sequences with precision, never losing narrative coherence. The film's tone is one of its strongest achievements. Craig balances classic slasher energy with a satirical edge that critiques generational divides and small-town hypocrisy. Through the use of the town's mascot clown, Frendo, as the killer's guise, he injects an element of dark humor while maintaining genuine terror. The humor never undercuts the fear. Instead, it enhances the film's commentary on how quickly civility can unravel under pressure. His direction ensures that even moments of absurdity feel grounded in emotional truth. Visually, the direction leans on stark contrasts. The cornfield itself becomes a central visual motif, a maze of life and death, order and chaos. Craig employs wide shots to convey isolation and claustrophobic close-ups during chase scenes to heighten the sense of panic. The lighting shifts from warm, nostalgic hues in the early scenes to cold, high-contrast shadows as the killings intensify, symbolizing the moral decay beneath the town's surface. This deliberate shift in tone through visual language shows a director in full control of his aesthetic. The staging of action sequences is another standout aspect. The director uses geography smartly, ensuring that the audience always understands where characters are in relation to danger. The cornfield, the abandoned fairgrounds, and the school gymnasium are used not just as locations but as extensions of the characters' mental states. In moments of pursuit, the camera often tracks behind the victims, creating a sense of helpless immersion, while the killer's approach is revealed through cleverly timed focus shifts and environmental cues rather than cheap jump scares. Craig's guidance of actors reflects his background in character-driven storytelling. He avoids exaggerated performances, asking his cast to play their fear and anger realistically. Quinn's growth from grieving outsider to determined survivor feels authentic because the direction emphasizes subtle reactions and small emotional beats rather than dramatic outbursts. When the chaos begins, Craig shifts to tighter framing, allowing expressions of panic and resilience to drive the scene's emotional power. His direction also shows restraint in violence. Though the film doesn't shy away from gore, it's never exploitative. Each death serves the story's rhythm and commentary, reinforcing how ideology and hatred destroy communities. This choice underscores Craig's maturity as a director who understands horror's thematic potential beyond surface-level scares. The film's editing rhythm complements his vision perfectly. Cuts are deliberate and rhythmic, creating a visual cadence that mirrors a heartbeat, calm in moments of reflection, rapid during scenes of pursuit. Transitions between acts are clean, often using environmental sounds like the rustle of corn or distant laughter to maintain tension even between scenes. Sound design under Craig's supervision plays an integral role in direction. The rustling of corn stalks, the eerie echo of children's laughter, and the distorted carnival music associated with Frendo all contribute to a sonic texture that keeps the viewer uneasy. The director uses silence as effectively as noise, understanding that anticipation can be scarier than what's shown. Overall, Eli Craig's direction in Clown in a Cornfield transforms what could have been a standard slasher into something layered and atmospheric. His mastery of tone, visual storytelling, and pacing anchors the chaos in emotional depth. By merging horror thrills with commentary on modern disillusionment, he elevates the film beyond its genre roots. The result is a tightly controlled, visually rich, and thematically resonant piece of filmmaking that leaves a lasting impression, proving that strong direction can make even the simplest premise deeply compelling. The cinematography of Clown in a Cornfield stands as one of its most defining strengths, creating an immersive world where visual storytelling heightens every beat of tension and dread. Director of photography Mark Irwin crafts a visual language that reflects both the nostalgic Americana of small-town life and the brutal undercurrent lurking beneath its surface. His approach combines traditional horror framing techniques with modern precision, ensuring that every shot not only serves aesthetic beauty but also deepens emotional and narrative impact. From the opening sequence, the cinematography sets the tone. The wide establishing shots of Kettle Springs emphasize its isolation and fading charm, a once thriving town now surrounded by endless fields of corn, symbolizing both fertility and decay. The camera lingers on these golden fields under bright daylight, offering deceptive calm before darkness consumes the story. As night falls, the same fields transform into a labyrinth of shadows, their texture shifting from serene to suffocating. This duality in imagery mirrors the movie's central theme of innocence turned to chaos. Irwin's framing choices throughout the film reveal a meticulous attention to how perspective shapes emotion. The use of wide framing captures the vulnerability of characters lost in vast, open spaces, while tight close-ups isolate them in moments of fear, amplifying claustrophobia. When Quinn first enters the cornfield, the camera keeps a medium distance, allowing the stalks to dominate the frame and slowly close in. By contrast, during confrontation scenes, the lens pulls in sharply on faces, trapping both the audience and characters in their panic. The shifting use of camera distance becomes an invisible storyteller, moving the viewer between empathy and dread. Lighting plays a crucial role in defining the film's visual tone. Early scenes employ soft, natural lighting to evoke normalcy, a bright blue sky, the warm glow of streetlights, and the soft interior lighting of homes. But as the narrative descends into horror, the lighting shifts dramatically. High-contrast setups dominate, mixing deep shadows with sharp highlights to distort the familiar. The cornfield at night is lit in a way that feels both naturalistic and unreal, using subtle fog and moonlight to create depth while obscuring threats. This interplay between light and darkness embodies the film's moral and emotional core, where nothing is as safe as it appears. One of the most striking sequences occurs during the Halloween carnival scene. The cinematography here becomes deliberately chaotic. Handheld camera movements and vibrant color palettes mirror the adrenaline of the crowd before the massacre begins. Neon reds and cold blues splash across faces, evoking the disorientation of both joy and fear. As violence erupts, the palette desaturates slightly, the camera movements stabilize, and the chaos becomes eerily composed, forcing the viewer to confront brutality without the comfort of cinematic exaggeration. The cornfield sequences showcase Irwin's mastery of movement. Tracking shots glide through rows of corn with deliberate slowness, creating the sense that something unseen is always watching. The use of Steadicam allows for fluid motion during chase scenes, immersing viewers in the frantic rhythm of survival. In contrast, sudden handheld jolts punctuate moments of shock, mirroring the character's loss of control. These transitions between controlled and chaotic movement mirror the film's tonal shifts, ensuring that the cinematography feels emotionally synchronized with the story. Color theory also plays a vital role in shaping mood. The film's color palette evolves from warm and inviting to cold and menacing. In the first act, golden hues and muted pastels dominate, capturing the nostalgic innocence of small-town life. By the midpoint, the palette cools, earthy browns give way to sickly greens and deep blacks, representing the corruption and fear consuming the town. The killer's clown mask, with its stark white and crimson tones, becomes the focal point of every frame it inhabits, a visual reminder of duality, comedy and terror intertwined. One of the most memorable visual moments comes near the finale when Quinn faces the killer in the burning barn. The cinematography captures this confrontation with poetic contrast. Bright orange flames illuminate Quinn's determined face, while deep shadows cloak her attacker. The flickering firelight becomes a living entity, reflecting the chaos and transformation of both characters. The visual rhythm here is mesmerizing, blending terror with beauty in a way that feels almost painterly. Depth of field is another subtle yet effective tool Irwin employs. Throughout the film, shallow focus is used to isolate characters, drawing attention to their psychological states, while deep focus during ensemble scenes keeps multiple characters visible, underscoring the community's collective breakdown. This manipulation of visual focus constantly reminds the audience where to look, what to feel, and what to fear. The cinematography never feels decorative, it is essential to the film's storytelling. Each visual choice, be it framing, lighting, or movement, reinforces the emotional journey of the characters and the thematic tension between conformity and rebellion. Even simple shots, like Quinn staring out of her car window or the camera drifting across a field of empty scarecrows, carry layered meaning. Mark Irwin's camera work in Clown in a Cornfield transforms a straightforward slasher narrative into a visually poetic meditation on fear, community, and transformation. It lingers long after the credits roll, not because of shock value, but because every frame feels purposeful. The cinematography captures both beauty and brutality with equal care, turning the cornfield itself into a living, breathing character, a silent witness to the horrors born from human division and desperation. The editing and pacing of Clown in a Cornfield serve as the backbone of its storytelling, controlling the film's rhythm, intensity, and emotional impact. Edited by Christopher Robin Bell, the film demonstrates a keen awareness of how timing and structure can shape both horror and character drama. The editing does not simply stitch together scares, it orchestrates a continuous sense of unease, manipulating silence, speed, and perspective to build suspense in a way that feels organic rather than forced. Bell's approach to editing emphasizes clarity in chaos. The opening act moves with deliberate patience, allowing viewers to settle into the rhythm of Kettle Springs before the horror begins. Establishing shots linger slightly longer than expected, giving the audience time to absorb the environment and its decaying charm. This slower pace is crucial because it creates a strong foundation for the characters. The editor understands that fear is more effective when you care about the people involved, and so the first 30 minutes are marked by long takes, gentle transitions, and restrained cutting. The pacing mirrors small-town life, unhurried and routine, until the violence erupts, at which point the film's tempo shifts dramatically. The transition from calm to chaos is one of the film's editing highlights. Once the killings begin, Bell accelerates the rhythm, introducing shorter cuts and faster cross-cutting between simultaneous scenes. This shift in tempo is jarring in the best way, mirroring the characters' panic and disorientation. The switch feels earned because it builds naturally from the film's narrative escalation. Each sequence flows into the next with a sense of inevitability, and even in moments of frenetic energy, the editing maintains spatial awareness. You always know where characters are in relation to one another, which keeps the tension grounded rather than confusing. The use of cross-cutting becomes particularly effective during the midpoint massacre. As the town's carnival descends into chaos, the editor intercuts between the party, the cornfield, and isolated characters trying to escape. The rhythm of these cuts grows increasingly fast, syncing with the escalating screams and pounding score. The editing builds a crescendo of dread before abruptly cutting to silence, a powerful choice that allows the audience to exhale after an extended period of anxiety. This manipulation of pace through editing showcases Bell's command of tension dynamics. One of the strongest aspects of the film's editing lies in its use of silence and restraint. Rather than relying on constant visual and auditory assault, Bell frequently cuts to stillness at crucial moments. For example, after a violent confrontation, there's often a brief pause where the sound drops and the camera lingers on aftermath rather than action. These quiet beats allow the horror to settle emotionally, making the film feel more mature than typical slashers that depend solely on jump scares. The pacing throughout the second act maintains a delicate balance between urgency and reflection. While chase sequences move rapidly, intercutting between different characters' perspectives, the editor slows down during dialogue scenes to emphasize emotional stakes. This careful rhythm keeps the story from feeling monotonous, ensuring that moments of stillness and intensity complement one another. The decision to avoid excessive flashbacks or non-linear editing helps the narrative remain straightforward and easy to follow, which suits the film's grounded tone. Bell does, however, use brief flash edits during moments of trauma, fast, fragmented images that mimic memory flashes. These appear sparingly, such as when Quinn recalls her mother's death or envisions her father's warnings. They do not disrupt the story's flow but instead enrich its psychological undercurrent, showing how the past haunts the characters in subtle ways. The final act demonstrates the editor's mastery of rhythm. The climactic chase through the burning barn is paced with near-perfect tension. Cuts between wide shots of chaos and tight close-ups of Quinn's determined face create a push-pull sensation that mirrors her struggle for survival. The editing rhythm feels like a heartbeat, steady at first, then accelerating as danger closes in, culminating in quick, fragmented cuts during the final confrontation. The sequence concludes with an abrupt slow-motion shot, giving the resolution a haunting finality before transitioning smoothly into the film's quiet epilogue. The use of transitions throughout Clown in a Cornfield reflects both precision and purpose. Dissolves are used sparingly, reserved for moments that bridge emotional tone rather than time. Most scene changes rely on sharp cuts, maintaining momentum and grounding the story in immediacy. The pacing of the film overall leans toward classical horror structure: slow build, explosive midpoint, and sustained final act. While a few scenes in the first act could arguably move faster, the slower pacing ultimately pays off by enriching character depth and giving later terror more impact. Editing also plays a crucial role in supporting the film's thematic ideas. The rhythmic alternation between quiet town life and explosive violence mirrors the movie's commentary on generational conflict, how suppression and order inevitably erupt into chaos. The precision of these cuts reflects how control and chaos coexist in both narrative and editing design. Even the montage sequences, such as the setup for the carnival, are cut with rhythmic energy, hinting at coming disaster beneath the surface celebration. Ultimately, Christopher Robin Bell's editing defines the heartbeat of Clown in a Cornfield. His mastery of rhythm, silence, and pacing turns what could have been a standard slasher into a controlled, cinematic experience where every cut carries meaning. The editing trusts the audience's intelligence, using space and timing to heighten fear instead of overwhelming it. By controlling the pulse of the story so precisely, Bell ensures that tension never dissipates, delivering a film whose rhythm lingers long after the credits fade. The soundtrack and score of Clown in a Cornfield function as one of the most powerful tools in shaping its mood, tension, and emotional resonance. Composed by Nathan Barr, the music acts almost as an invisible narrator, guiding the audience through waves of unease, terror, and reflection. Rather than relying solely on traditional horror stings or jump-scare crescendos, Barr's score builds a textured sonic environment that feels organic to the setting of Kettle Springs while maintaining the precision of a modern horror composition. The score begins with a deceptively calm introduction, using soft piano notes and faint ambient textures to accompany the film's early scenes of small-town life. These opening musical cues establish a fragile piece, an auditory reflection of Kettle Springs' nostalgic surface. However, even within this calm, Barr weaves subtle dissonances, minor chords and low, sustained drones that suggest hidden rot beneath the town's wholesome image. This early use of contrast prepares the viewer subconsciously for the chaos that will follow, turning ordinary sounds into precursors of dread. As the story progresses, the score begins to manipulate tension through repetition and motif. One of the most effective musical choices is a recurring, distorted carnival theme associated with the town's mascot clown, Frendo. This motif begins faintly, sometimes just a few warped notes of a carnival tune played through a detuned music box, but becomes more pronounced whenever the killer appears. The distortion deepens as the violence escalates, transforming familiar playfulness into something grotesque. This recurring cue not only ties the killer to the town's corrupted identity but also works as an oral trigger for fear, making the audience tense up the moment they hear it. The film also employs silence with remarkable intelligence. Barr and the sound design team understand that absence of music can be just as powerful as any orchestral swell. During moments of stalking or anticipation, the soundtrack often drops out completely, allowing only the sounds of rustling corn, distant footsteps, or labored breathing to fill the space. These quiet interludes heighten tension by focusing the viewer's attention on every creak and whisper, creating a raw intimacy that amplifies fear. When the music does return, it feels earned, an eruption of sound that mirrors the character's emotional release. One standout example of this dynamic occurs during the first major kill sequence. The score starts with a low pulsing rhythm, mimicking a heartbeat, gradually layered with distorted strings that rise and fall like waves of panic. Just before the attack, the music cuts off entirely, leaving a vacuum of silence. The sudden stillness lasts just long enough for discomfort to settle before the killing blow lands, punctuated by a harsh burst of percussive noise. This precise interplay of sound and silence demonstrates how the score manipulates audience expectation and fear without resorting to cliché. The film's middle section introduces brief uses of licensed music, particularly during the town carnival and party scenes. These tracks, modern rock and indie songs with upbeat tempos, create a false sense of normalcy and youthful rebellion. The editor and composer time their transitions so that the music fades out naturally into ambient dread, reinforcing how quickly joy can turn into terror. In one particularly effective scene, A cheerful pop song continues to play faintly in the background as chaos erupts around it, the cheerful melody clashing with screams. This juxtaposition of tone through sound is both chilling and thematically sharp, highlighting the thin line between community celebration and collective violence. Bar's orchestral elements rely heavily on strings, brass, and synthetic layers that blend the organic with the mechanical. The strings often provide emotional grounding, conveying Quinn's vulnerability or resolve, while deep brass and electronic bass pulses underscore moments of threat. The blend of digital and acoustic instruments reflects the film's thematic clash between modern youth and old-fashioned tradition, making the music an extension of the story's ideological conflict. Throughout the film, certain instruments are tied to specific emotions or characters. Quinn's scenes are often accompanied by a melancholic cello melody, sparse yet resonant, representing her isolation and grief. In contrast, the killer's appearances distort recognizable sounds, fragments of laughter, reversed notes, and pitch-shifted carnival bells, creating aural discomfort that feels both alien and familiar. These recurring sonic associations turn the score into a psychological language that communicates fear, guilt, and defiance without dialogue. The pacing of the score mirrors the editing rhythm perfectly. During high-intensity chases, the tempo accelerates with staccato percussion and shrieking violins, driving the action without overwhelming it. Yet in reflective moments, Bar allows space for slower, lingering chords that let emotion breathe. This sensitivity to rhythm ensures that the music never feels intrusive. It enhances mood rather than dictating it, allowing viewers to feel rather than simply react. The finale provides one of the score's most haunting sequences. As Quinn faces the killer in the burning barn, the soundtrack combines swelling orchestral layers with distorted echoes of the earlier carnival theme. The merging of these motifs symbolizes Quinn's confrontation with both personal trauma and the town's collective madness. When the fire consumes the barn, the score rises to an almost operatic intensity before fading into a single sustained note as silence takes over once again. The closing moments return to the soft piano motif from the film's opening, but this time the melody feels colder, stripped of innocence, suggesting survival but not peace. Nathan Barr's work on Clown in a Cornfield transforms the film's soundscape into a living entity that reacts to every emotional and narrative shift. The soundtrack does not merely accompany visuals, it shapes perception, defines atmosphere, and carries the film's heart. Through its use of motif, silence, and emotional contrast, the score becomes an integral storytelling device. By the end, it is impossible to separate the movie's terror from its music, as each beat, pause, and note contributes to a haunting experience that resonates long after the final frame. Beneath its surface as a brutal slasher, Clown in a Cornfield is a story about division, control, and the destructive consequences of fear. It uses horror as a mirror to reflect the generational and cultural fractures of small-town America. The film's setting, Kettle Springs, is not just a backdrop but a living metaphor for communities trapped between nostalgia and change. Its residents are caught in conflict between those who cling to the old ways and those who dare to evolve. This tension drives nearly every action, shaping the story's deeper themes of identity, conformity, revenge, and survival. At its core, the movie explores what happens when a community allows resentment to rot beneath its surface. The older generation of Kettle Springs, represented by the town's mayor and factory owners, blames the younger generation for its decline. They see modern youth as disrespectful, lazy, and detached from traditional values. Meanwhile, the teenagers feel misunderstood and suffocated by the town's hypocrisy. The killing spree that unfolds is not random, it's the violent eruption of this ideological war. The clown, Frendo, becomes the symbol of this collapse, embodying the rage of a society devouring itself. The mask hides not just a killer but the collective hatred born from fear of change. The film's treatment of identity is particularly nuanced through its protagonist, Quinn Maybrook. She begins the story as an outsider, a girl who moves to Kettle Springs seeking stability after her mother's death. Her journey reflects the tension between personal grief and societal pressure to belong. Quinn's arc symbolizes the struggle for self-definition in a world that tries to impose identity. She learns to reject both apathy and blind conformity, standing for her own moral compass when the town falls apart. Her eventual role as the survivor is not about luck or strength alone but about moral clarity. She becomes the embodiment of empathy in a place where cruelty has become normalized. Revenge and justice intertwine throughout the narrative as another major theme. Many of the adult characters justify their violence as a way to clean up the town or restore discipline, but their actions reveal that revenge only breeds more chaos. The film critiques the false righteousness behind vigilantism. Through imagery, the cornfield burning, the clown's grotesque smile, the blood-stained fairgrounds, the story shows that moral decay disguised as order can destroy an entire community. The killer's motivation, when revealed, exposes how easily fear can transform into justification for atrocity. In this way, the film echoes broader social anxieties about generational misunderstanding and the dangerous extremes of moral panic. Power and control also run through the film's veins. The adults in Kettle Springs see their authority slipping away, and their violent response is an attempt to reclaim dominance. The cornfield itself, once a symbol of productivity and sustenance, becomes a battlefield where that control collapses. The film's direction emphasizes this theme visually through scenes of entrapment. Characters lost in the maze-like cornfield represent the town's collective blindness. The clown's presence is a perverse reminder of how those in power often hide their cruelty behind smiles and tradition. Fear, in Clown in a Cornfield, is both a weapon and a disease. It fuels the killer's ideology and paralyzes those who could resist it. The film uses horror conventions, chases, shadows, and silence, not only to scare but to comment on how communities can be controlled through intimidation. Fear divides the young and old, isolates the compassionate from the cowardly, and ultimately turns the town inward. When Quinn overcomes her fear, she symbolically breaks the cycle, representing hope that understanding can overcome hatred. Another subtle but vital theme is the illusion of unity. Kettle Springs presents itself as a wholesome community with shared values, but underneath lies division, envy, and secrecy. The town meetings, the fair, and even the mascot are facades of togetherness masking alienation. The massacre tears away these illusions, exposing the fragility of social order. The recurring imagery of the clown, a figure meant to entertain, becomes a haunting representation of how appearances can conceal rot. The film's commentary on conformity and rebellion adds another layer to its meaning. The teenagers, though imperfect, represent authenticity and freedom. Their parties, defiance, and mistakes are acts of individuality in a world demanding obedience. The adults, conversely, cling to rigid control and moral superiority. The collision of these two forces becomes the film's moral crucible, questioning whether rebellion is chaos or a necessary act of survival. The movie's message is not simple condemnation of one side or the other, it's a warning about what happens when understanding dies and dialogue turns to violence. Through visual symbolism, Clown in a Cornfield communicates its themes more powerfully than through words. The cornfield itself is a recurring image of entrapment and rebirth. Characters hide within it, die in it, and ultimately escape through it. Fire, used in the film's climax, represents both destruction and purification, suggesting that renewal can only come through confronting the truth. Even the town's decaying factories and empty streets serve as visual metaphors for moral decline and economic despair. The film occasionally presents mixed signals about its themes, especially regarding its portrayal of youth rebellion and authority. Some scenes risk glorifying violence as justice, while others condemn it outright. However, this inconsistency adds to the film's realism. Morality in Kettle Springs is murky, just like in real life. By refusing to offer easy answers, the story invites viewers to question who the real monsters are: the masked killer or the society that created him. Ultimately, Clown in a Cornfield uses horror to dissect modern America's fractures. It's a movie about how fear erodes empathy, how anger replaces dialogue, and how innocence gets buried under the weight of blame. Beneath the blood and screams lies a warning about what happens when generations stop listening to each other. Through its themes of revenge, identity, and social decay, the film transcends its genre roots to become a reflection of the times, a violent, unflinching portrait of a world haunted not by monsters in masks, but by the faces behind them. Clown in a Cornfield blends practical horror craftsmanship with selective use of digital effects, creating an atmosphere that feels grounded yet heightened by moments of stylized terror. The visual effects, VFX, in the film serve a clear purpose. They amplify tension, enhance gore, and bring the masked killer's chaotic world to life without pulling the viewer out of the experience. Directed with a focus on realism and atmosphere, the filmmakers rely heavily on in-camera tricks, makeup prosthetics, and controlled lighting to achieve most of the horror imagery. However, subtle CGI touches are used to clean up shots, extend backgrounds, and intensify action sequences, especially during the third act's explosive finale. One of the most effective uses of visual effects appears early in the movie when the camera lingers on the decrepit cornfield, shrouded in mist. Digital enhancements are used to thicken the fog and add eerie motion to the cornstalks, making the environment feel alive and oppressive. This blending of natural landscape with light CGI builds the film's visual identity. It's rural, haunting, and unpredictable. The titular clown, a grotesque figure haunting the small town of Kettle Springs, is brought to life mostly through practical effects. The costume design and prosthetic mask create a tangible menace that looks unnervingly real. However, during intense chase scenes and violent confrontations, digital effects help enhance the physicality of the character. For example, blood splatter and environmental destruction are digitally layered to ensure consistency across frames. The result is a series of death scenes that feel shocking but not cartoonish, achieving the right balance between realism and stylization. The film's use of CGI is particularly notable during sequences involving fire and environmental collapse. When the cornfield catches fire in the climax, digital flames and embers are integrated with real pyrotechnics to produce an engulfing sense of chaos. This sequence stands out not just for its scale, but for how convincingly it merges practical and digital elements. Instead of the overly glossy sheen that often plagues modern horror, the effects here maintain texture and grit, reflecting the film's grounded aesthetic. VFX also enhance the film's tension through background details that many viewers might not consciously notice. Subtle digital manipulations, like changing the color temperature of a frame or darkening corners to suggest unseen movement, heighten paranoia. These small, invisible touches make the audience feel that danger lurks just beyond what the camera reveals. The digital cleanup work throughout the movie also deserves credit. In several fast-paced scenes, particularly those shot at night or in confined interiors, visual effects help stabilize the lighting and smooth transitions between takes. This not only improves continuity but keeps the rhythm tight, ensuring that the scares hit with precision. The balance between CGI and practical gore is where Clown in a Cornfield excels compared to many recent slasher films. The creative team understands that horror loses its bite when it feels too artificial. By grounding every visual effect in something physical, a prop, a mask, or a stunt, the film maintains believability even when the action escalates into surreal territory. The filmmakers also resist the temptation to rely on digital trickery for jump scares. Instead, they use VFX sparingly, as a tool for escalation rather than manipulation. For instance, a key scene where the clown emerges from a dark corn maze employs a gradual visual reveal supported by CGI shadow work. It's a smart, understated use of technology that heightens dread without betraying the movie's tactile tone. Even the film's quieter moments benefit from digital craftsmanship. Subtle environmental enhancements, like rain reflections, flickering lights, or atmospheric haze, enrich the film's visual storytelling. These flourishes never distract. They reinforce the mood and ensure the world feels fully realized. The final act, which transitions from slasher horror to action survival, showcases the most aggressive VFX work. Explosions, collapsing structures, and wide aerial shots of the burning cornfield all demonstrate high production value. Yet despite the spectacle, these effects remain coherent with the rest of the film's visual language. They heighten emotion rather than overshadow it. In sum, Clown in a Cornfield uses visual effects with restraint and intelligence. The CGI supports the narrative rather than existing for spectacle, while practical effects maintain authenticity. The result is a horror film that looks polished but never sterile, visually ambitious yet emotionally grounded. Its effects serve the story, reinforcing its themes of chaos and control, and ensuring that every scare feels earned rather than manufactured. The set design and locations in Clown in a Cornfield play a crucial role in shaping the movie's atmosphere, grounding its horror in a world that feels tangible, familiar, and unsettlingly real. The production design captures the contrast between small-town simplicity and the creeping menace that lurks beneath the surface. Every environment, from classrooms and homes to the cornfield itself, carries a visual story that deepens the film's themes of decay, isolation, and suppressed rage. At the heart of the film lies the town of Kettle Springs, Missouri, a once thriving community now eroded by economic decline and generational conflict. The filmmakers chose to shoot in authentic midwestern locations, giving the town an organic realism that enhances immersion. Cracked sidewalks, weathered storefronts, and half-empty diners suggest a place forgotten by time. The production design leans into the quiet sadness of a community left behind, transforming ordinary settings into sources of tension. The main street, with its faded murals and boarded-up windows, tells the story of a town whose best days are long gone. The school, another major location, functions as both a social hub and a battleground. Its sterile hallways and flickering fluorescent lights evoke the conformity and monotony of high school life, while small design touches, graffiti on lockers, scattered flyers, outdated computers, add realism. The art department's attention to these micro-details helps viewers feel the authenticity of the space, making later moments of chaos even more shocking when blood splatters across once ordinary walls. The set dressing in student homes adds emotional depth to the characters. Quinn's family house, for instance, reflects grief and displacement. The modest furniture, half-unpacked boxes, and family photographs convey both a sense of transition and emotional weight. It's a believable lived-in space that mirrors Quinn's struggle to adapt to a new environment while carrying the memory of her mother's death. In contrast, the antagonist spaces, particularly the abandoned carnival grounds and the decrepit farmhouse, reveal the darker underbelly of the town. These sets are constructed with care to feel authentic but infused with dread. The peeling wallpaper, rusted tools, and dim lantern light in the farmhouse create a claustrophobic atmosphere where danger feels ever present. The art direction balances realism with symbolic undertones, decay as a reflection of moral rot. The Cornfield, the film's most iconic setting, is both a natural landscape and a meticulously managed production environment. Its rows of towering stalks form a labyrinth that traps both characters and viewers in a world of uncertainty. The production team used practical lighting setups, hidden floodlights and handheld rigs, to create eerie movement in the corn during night scenes. The result is an environment that feels alive, breathing with menace. This setting is not just a backdrop, it's a character that mirrors the film's core tension between order and chaos. Real locations were smartly supplemented by studio builds for scenes requiring precision and safety. The barn massacre sequence, for example, was partially recreated on a soundstage to control lighting and choreography. The combination of practical construction and authentic materials, aged wood, real farming equipment, and dirt-covered flooring, maintains visual continuity with the exterior shots. These controlled environments allowed for complex stunt coordination while preserving the gritty realism that defines the film's look. The color palette of the set design also contributes significantly to mood. Warm, earthy tones dominate daytime scenes, giving a false sense of comfort, while the palette shifts to colder hues at night, emphasizing fear and detachment. This visual rhythm supports the emotional arc of the story, drawing the audience deeper into its psychological landscape. Small design choices add layers of meaning. The recurring presence of clown imagery, painted murals, old posters, and carnival relics, reminds viewers of the town's former identity tied to its festival culture, now twisted into something sinister. These artifacts aren't just decoration, they're visual echoes of the town's lost innocence. Even background props, such as rusting farm tools or outdated machinery, reinforce the film's themes of neglect and decay. The production team's commitment to authenticity extends to lighting integration within the sets. Lamps, neon signs, and flickering bulbs were embedded into the environment to create natural sources of illumination. This technique grounds the film visually, avoiding the artificial gloss that often undermines horror realism. The result is a world that feels tactile and immediate. The abandoned spaces, especially the derelict factory used in the film's climax, represent the decay of collective morality. Layers of grime, broken glass, and forgotten machinery turn the location into a physical manifestation of the town's spiritual decline. The production design transforms these ruins into visual metaphors for what the story explores: how communities corrode when they cling to outdated ideals. In Clown in a Cornfield, every location and prop feels intentional, contributing to the movie's tone and subtext. The careful blending of real-world environments with constructed sets ensures both believability and control, allowing the filmmakers to shape tension through space itself. The result is a visually cohesive world that heightens fear not through extravagance but through familiarity, because the scariest places are often the ones that feel like home. The dialogue and script of Clown in a Cornfield serve as the film's backbone, carrying both the emotional tone and thematic direction of the story. Written with a deliberate blend of realism and genre stylization, the screenplay walks a careful line between teenage banter, small-town cynicism, and survival horror intensity. The script captures how people in crisis communicate, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes with dark humor, and often with words left unsaid. From the opening moments, the dialogue establishes the generational divide at the heart of the story. Adults speak in clipped, weary tones full of nostalgia and resentment for what the town used to be, while the younger characters use sarcasm, memes, and casual slang that mark them as products of the modern world. This contrast is intentional. It creates rhythm and conflict even in mundane exchanges. A scene early in the film between Quinn Maybrook and her father captures this perfectly. He urges her to give the new town a chance, but she deflects with half-hearted agreement and silence. What she doesn't say, her internal grief and frustration, carries more emotional weight than any explicit line could. The screenplay's strength lies in these quiet beats of subtext. Many of the film's best moments are built around the tension between spoken words and hidden feelings. Characters often communicate their fear or guilt indirectly, using humor or sarcasm as emotional armor. For example, Cole's jokes during high-stress scenes aren't just comic relief, they mask his panic and his need to maintain control. These nuances give the script texture, making the characters feel multidimensional even within a fast-paced horror framework. When violence begins to escalate, the tone of the dialogue shifts dramatically. Conversations become terse, fragmented, and primal. The script drops exposition and focuses on action-driven exchanges that reflect survival instincts taking over. A single shouted word or short command carries more urgency than a full monologue. The writing mirrors the chaos of the situation, using brevity to heighten fear and realism. The killer's dialogue, or lack of it, is another deliberate choice. The clown's minimal verbal expression amplifies his menace. When he does speak, his lines are simple, mocking, and cruel, echoing the twisted morality that drives his actions. This selective use of speech creates a psychological imbalance between killer and victim, reinforcing the idea that silence can be far more terrifying than sound. Beyond character interaction, the script functions as a commentary on small-town decay and generational resentment. Dialogue between the older townsfolk often veers into passive-aggressive nostalgia, blaming the youth for moral decline and social disconnection. Their conversations drip with judgment and suppressed anger, turning ordinary dialogue into subtextual conflict. When these characters later become complicit in violence, their earlier words resonate with haunting irony. The screenplay also demonstrates restraint in exposition. Instead of dumping backstory through dialogue, it allows context to emerge naturally through argument and gossip. Characters mention the town's declining factory, the closed carnival, and past accidents in passing conversation, letting the world-building feel organic. This naturalistic approach helps the film avoid the heavy-handedness that plagues many horror scripts. One of the most impressive aspects of the writing is its rhythm. The pacing of dialogue mirrors the overall narrative tempo, slower and conversational at first, then increasingly clipped and chaotic as danger rises. The transitions between tones feel seamless, maintaining a sense of urgency without losing coherence. Each conversation pushes something forward, whether it's emotional understanding or narrative momentum. However, the script is not without flaws. Some exchanges between teenage characters can feel overly self-aware, leaning into stereotypes of how young people talk rather than authentic speech. A few lines land with a thud because they feel written for effect instead of character truth. These moments don't derail the film but remind viewers that it's a crafted piece of genre fiction rather than pure naturalism. The climactic confrontation scenes showcase the script at its most powerful. When Quinn faces her enemies, the dialogue strips away pretense. Words become weapons, short, angry, and emotionally raw. Her final lines are less about survival and more about defiance, marking her transformation from victim to fighter. The economy of language here speaks volumes, illustrating how a well-timed line can define an entire character arc. The script also uses silence as a narrative tool. Long pauses, muffled screams, or the absence of dialogue during chase sequences create an almost physical tension. In these moments, the screenplay trusts visual storytelling, proving that sometimes what isn't said can amplify fear more effectively than words. Subtext is the true power of Clown in a Cornfield's writing. Every argument about tradition, every sarcastic jab between teens, every moral speech from an adult carries double meaning. The town isn't just divided by age, it's divided by ideology. The script turns conversation into a battlefield where resentment festers beneath politeness, and fear hides behind forced optimism. In the end, Clown in a Cornfield's dialogue and script succeed because they feel lived in, emotional, and purposeful. The words reveal character and theme without resorting to clumsy exposition, and the silences deepen the impact of what's left unsaid. By balancing realism with heightened tension, the screenplay crafts a voice that feels both specific to its world and universal in its message about communication, fear, and the failure to truly listen until it's too late. Clown in a Cornfield stands firmly within the horror genre but also weaves in elements of slasher, thriller, and social drama, creating a film that feels both familiar and distinctly modern. Its genre execution balances reverence for classic horror conventions with fresh commentary on small-town decay and generational conflict. What makes it stand out is not just its gore or suspense but how it uses those elements to reflect societal tension. At its core, Clown in a Cornfield is a slasher, and it embraces that identity unapologetically. It follows the classic setup, a group of teenagers trapped in a confined, isolated setting being hunted by a masked killer. This structure immediately recalls the DNA of horror staples like Halloween, Friday the 13th, and Scream. The film uses many familiar beats, a mysterious opening kill, a rising body count, and a final showdown between the survivor and the killer, but it delivers them with sharper pacing, tighter character focus, and modern sensibility. Unlike many slashers that rely purely on shock and spectacle, this film roots its horror in moral and generational conflict. The adults of Kettle Springs are not passive bystanders but active participants in the chaos, motivated by resentment toward a younger generation they see as lazy, disrespectful, and disconnected. This twist expands the typical slasher template into something closer to social horror, reminiscent of how Jordan Peele's Get Out or Ari Aster's Midsommar use genre trappings to comment on real-world anxieties. The blending of psychological and physical terror gives the movie more thematic depth than most standard slashers. When it comes to horror mechanics, the film executes its scares with precision. It avoids cheap jump scares in favor of suspense built through pacing, lighting, and sound design. The cornfield sequences exemplify this approach. The slow rustle of stalks, faint laughter echoing through the night, and sudden bursts of movement create tension that feels earned. The killer's clown mask, both grotesque and symbolic, evokes primal fear while also serving as a critique of how the town hides its corruption behind nostalgia and tradition. The film's violence is graphic but controlled. Every kill has weight and purpose, not just shock value. The editing and camera work keep the gore grounded in realism rather than excess, making the violence disturbing rather than cartoonish. This restraint aligns the movie with elevated horror trends seen in recent hits like X and the Black Phone, appealing to audiences who prefer atmosphere and storytelling over gratuitous bloodshed. Yet, despite its sophistication, Clown in a Cornfield never forgets to entertain. It delivers the adrenaline and catharsis horror fans crave, with chase sequences that feel kinetic and claustrophobic. The pacing is calibrated to maintain suspense without exhausting the viewer. Each act of the film builds on the previous one, escalating danger while revealing deeper layers of moral ambiguity. The film also excels in balancing tone. It understands the fine line between seriousness and self-awareness. There are moments of dark humor, but they never undercut tension. The writing and direction show respect for genre tradition while keeping the narrative grounded in contemporary relevance. The film acknowledges that audiences are genre-savvy but still manages to surprise them by subverting certain expectations. For instance, characters who might seem destined to die early often survive longer, while others perish unexpectedly, keeping viewers on edge. In terms of genre fidelity, Clown in a Cornfield delivers all the hallmarks of a successful slasher: an isolated setting, a masked killer, a morally charged motive, and a resilient final girl. However, it refreshes these tropes through its emphasis on realism, social commentary, and character-driven storytelling. The film's horror arises not just from the clown or the cornfield but from what those symbols represent: rage, hypocrisy, and the collapse of empathy in divided communities. This thematic layering elevates it beyond simple genre entertainment. Compared to other horror releases, it occupies a middle ground between mainstream accessibility and arthouse ambition. Fans of fast-paced slasher thrills will find plenty to enjoy, but those looking for deeper meaning will also be rewarded. Its ability to satisfy both audiences speaks to its confident genre execution. The use of atmosphere also contributes heavily to its horror identity. The small-town backdrop is both nostalgic and haunting, echoing films like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where ordinary Americana becomes a stage for nightmare. The cornfield setting, an icon of rural life, transforms into a claustrophobic labyrinth that mirrors the character's entrapment, both physical and moral. The direction and cinematography treat this setting with reverence, turning natural spaces into instruments of fear. Where the film occasionally stumbles is in pacing during the midsection, where exposition briefly overtakes tension. However, these moments are short-lived and ultimately pay off by enriching the story's stakes. The climax, which fuses slasher intensity with psychological revelation, proves the film understands the genre's purpose: to confront fear, guilt, and violence in a way that feels both cathartic and unsettling. In terms of innovation, Clown in a Cornfield doesn't reinvent horror but redefines how classic conventions can reflect modern anxieties. It honors the spirit of 1980s slashers while injecting new urgency through its exploration of generational warfare, online culture, and moral panic. By doing so, it bridges the gap between nostalgic horror and contemporary storytelling. For American audiences, it hits the sweet spot. Scary enough to thrill, smart enough to linger, and grounded enough to feel real. In the end, Clown in a Cornfield proves that horror still has room to evolve. Its genre execution succeeds because it respects what came before while daring to say something new, reminding viewers that the true monsters often wear familiar faces, and sometimes, those faces are painted with a smile. Clown in a Cornfield operates on more than just a surface level of horror and suspense. It's a story deeply rooted in American social and cultural anxieties. Beneath its blood-soaked exterior lies a biting commentary on generational divide, economic decay, moral panic, and the breakdown of small-town America. The film uses its setting, characters, and violence as metaphors for broader societal tensions, making it as much a reflection of the times as it is a piece of entertainment. At its core, the movie explores the clash between older generations clinging to a vanishing way of life and younger generations trying to redefine identity in a world that no longer values tradition. Kettle Springs, the fictional small town where the story unfolds, serves as a microcosm of rural America, once prosperous, now forgotten. Factories have closed, businesses have dried up, and what remains is nostalgia turned sour. The adults in the town see the youth as symbols of moral decay, glued to phones, disengaged, and disrespectful, while the teens view the adults as bitter, hypocritical, and unwilling to change. This generational hostility becomes the movie's emotional and thematic engine. Through this lens, the film examines how fear of change and loss of control can mutate into hatred. The townspeople's frustration with social shifts, technology, politics, and culture eventually manifests as literal violence. The idea of adults hunting the youth isn't just a horror trope here, it's a metaphor for the social resentment simmering in many real-world communities. The script subtly references debates around cancel culture, social media addiction, and intergenerational blame, all filtered through the exaggerated lens of horror. In many ways, Clown in a Cornfield functions as an allegory for America's identity crisis. The clown itself, a relic of the town's former glory days, becomes a symbol of corrupted nostalgia. What was once an innocent mascot has turned into a figure of death and punishment. The message is clear: when nostalgia becomes toxic, it can destroy the very community it was meant to preserve. The clown's mask is not just a disguise for a killer, it's the face of denial, representing a generation refusing to acknowledge its own complicity in decline. The film also tackles class anxiety and economic despair. Kettle Springs is portrayed as a place left behind by globalization and modernization, where people channel their frustration not toward the systems that failed them but toward each other. This misplaced rage mirrors real social patterns across parts of rural America. Instead of addressing structural problems, the town scapegoats its youth, blaming them for a future that feels increasingly uncertain. This thematic undercurrent gives the film surprising resonance in the current cultural climate. Gender and power dynamics are another layer of the movie's commentary. The protagonist, Quinn, serves as a nuanced representation of young women navigating environments shaped by male authority and small-town conservatism. Her arc from quiet observer to active survivor mirrors a broader cultural shift toward empowerment and defiance in the face of patriarchal control. The adults' policing of youth behavior, especially the girls, reflects the moral hypocrisy of communities that demand purity while concealing their own corruption. The film handles these themes without heavy-handed preaching. Its social critique emerges through context and character action rather than direct statements. The tension between generations isn't presented as a simple good versus evil divide. Some adults show compassion, and some teens act recklessly. This moral complexity strengthens the realism of the commentary. The message is not that one side is right, but that both are trapped in a cycle of misunderstanding fueled by fear. Clown in a Cornfield also engages with the idea of performative morality and small-town image politics. The town leaders care more about preserving appearances than addressing real problems. Their obsession with the annual festival and the town's mascot represents how communities often prioritize symbols over substance. The destruction that follows is a direct consequence of ignoring truth in favor of nostalgia. Culturally, the film reflects the growing alienation in post-industrial America. The internet age has widened generational gaps, created echo chambers, and redefined what community means. The movie captures that disconnection through its dialogue and visual storytelling. Scenes of teens scrolling through social media while adults rant about lost values underline the communication breakdown at the heart of modern society. There are moments where the film's commentary risks oversimplification. The depiction of adults as villains converge on caricature, and some of the generational themes are spelled out too neatly. However, these occasional broad strokes serve the genre's heightened tone rather than weaken its impact. The horror framework allows exaggeration to highlight truths that would feel muted in a drama. The movie's release timing also makes its social critique especially relevant. Audiences in the United States have witnessed growing divisions over politics, culture, and morality. Clown in a Cornfield taps into that unease, showing how fear and frustration can breed violence when empathy disappears. Its cultural message resonates because it doesn't feel distant or abstract. It feels like an exaggerated mirror of real tensions simmering across the country. The ending reinforces this point. When Quinn confronts the chaos head-on, she represents a new generation refusing to inherit bitterness and hate. Her survival is not just physical but symbolic, a rejection of old cycles of resentment. The film closes on a note that feels both bleak and hopeful, acknowledging that healing requires more than survival. It requires understanding. Ultimately, Clown in a Cornfield succeeds as both horror and social commentary because it dares to reflect America's fractures through the lens of entertainment. It captures a cultural moment defined by fear of change, disconnection between generations, and nostalgia turned deadly. By doing so, it becomes not just a slasher film but a cautionary tale about what happens when a community forgets how to listen, adapt, and forgive. Audience engagement in Clown in a Cornfield plays a crucial role in shaping how viewers connect emotionally and intellectually with the film. This slasher-inspired thriller relies heavily on tension, character empathy, and moments of shock to sustain audience attention from start to finish. What makes Clown in a Cornfield engaging is not only its horror elements but also how it strategically balances dread with curiosity, leaving the audience constantly anticipating the next twist. From the opening scene, the film sets a tone that commands focus, a mix of eerie calm and escalating unease that signals something terrible is about to unfold. The audience's emotional involvement starts here, with the setup of a small-town atmosphere that feels deceptively peaceful before chaos takes hold. Viewers quickly find themselves identifying with the lead characters, particularly as the script gives them relatable fears and motivations. Fear is universal, and this film capitalizes on that emotion through its steady buildup of suspense, carefully timed jump scares, and moments of quiet panic that let viewers project their own anxieties onto the screen. The movie also taps into the communal nature of horror watching. Scenes that make audiences gasp or scream together become shared experiences, and Clown in a Cornfield seems designed with that in mind. Some scenes are so visually and emotionally striking that they provoke instant reactions, gasps during brutal kills, nervous laughter after a tense moment breaks, or even sighs of relief when a character narrowly escapes. These are not random occurrences but calculated moments of audience manipulation that reward engagement through emotional payoff. Humor also plays a subtle but effective role in maintaining engagement. In between scenes of violence and fear, short bursts of levity give viewers room to breathe, making the darker moments even more powerful by contrast. This rhythm of tension and release keeps the audience hooked while preventing emotional fatigue. Certain scenes, particularly those involving the masked killer, stand out as signature moments that define the viewing experience. These sequences are not only shocking but also cinematic highlights, crafted with careful attention to framing, lighting, and pacing. They are the scenes most likely to be replayed, dissected, or shared across social platforms. Modern horror audiences enjoy analyzing what they watch, and Clown in a Cornfield gives them plenty to discuss. Whether it's speculating about the killer's motives, debating character decisions, or spotting hidden clues in the background, the film encourages a participatory kind of engagement that extends beyond the screen. That makes it particularly effective for online communities that thrive on fan theories and breakdown videos. Emotional engagement also runs deeper than the fear factor. The film uses its central conflict to tap into themes of belonging, justice, and survival. Viewers find themselves emotionally invested not just in who lives or dies, but in what the story says about small-town dynamics and generational divides. When a film can make an audience care about its characters beyond their body count, it achieves a level of engagement that goes beyond simple thrills. Clown in a Cornfield manages to do this by grounding its horror in human experience. The movie's rewatchability lies in its layered storytelling and visual symbolism. On a second viewing, audiences notice details they may have missed the first time, subtle foreshadowing, recurring imagery, or background interactions that take on new meaning once the ending is known. This depth gives fans something to revisit, ensuring the film has staying power rather than being a one-time adrenaline rush. Certain moments are tailor-made for cultural resonance, likely to be gifted or referenced in horror fan communities. Whether it's a chilling reveal, a clever one-liner, or a perfectly timed scare, these bits of cinematic shorthand become part of the film's identity in online spaces. They help sustain conversation and keep the movie relevant long after release. Ultimately, Clown in a Cornfield's audience engagement comes from its ability to play with expectations while delivering satisfying emotional payoffs. It respects its viewers by offering intelligence beneath the terror and surprise within the familiar. For horror fans in particular, it provides the adrenaline, catharsis, and communal thrill that define great genre experiences. For casual viewers, it offers enough character depth and narrative intrigue to make the ride worthwhile. In both cases, it ensures that the conversation doesn't end when the credits roll but continues through debates, rewatches, and shared reactions. Exactly what a successful modern horror film should aim for. Comparing Clown in a Cornfield to other films in the horror and slasher genres reveals much about its creative intentions, influences, and where it stands in the modern landscape of thrillers. The movie exists in a space shaped by decades of genre-defining predecessors, from the classic slashers of the late 1970s and 1980s to more recent socially aware horror films that balance scares with commentary. Understanding its lineage helps highlight what it does well, what it borrows, and where it struggles to distinguish itself. At its core, Clown in a Cornfield channels the DNA of traditional slasher films like Halloween, Friday the 13th, and Scream. It shares their small-town setting, masked killer, and formulaic progression of escalating violence. Much like Halloween's Michael Myers, the antagonist in Clown in a Cornfield embodies a mix of mystery and menace, haunting the town not just as a killer but as a symbol of deeper societal decay. The film borrows this classic structure but updates it with a more contemporary edge. Faster pacing, sharper dialogue, and a focus on social tension rather than just survival horror. In many ways, it mirrors the self-awareness and meta-tone of Wes Craven's Scream, using genre familiarity as part of its storytelling. However, Clown in a Cornfield avoids leaning too heavily into parody or irony, aiming instead for a more grounded and menacing tone. It takes the tropes horror fans expect, isolated settings, clueless teens, escalating body count, and executes them with enough precision to feel fresh, even when the setup is familiar. Compared to films like The Texas Chainsaw Massacre or The Hills Have Eyes, which use rural America as a backdrop for raw, primal horror, Clown in a Cornfield feels more polished and stylized. Its depiction of small-town life carries a modern realism that replaces grime with glossy unease. This contrast helps it stand apart visually, though some purists might argue it loses the gritty authenticity that made those earlier films iconic. Where Clown in a Cornfield succeeds is in its thematic blending of horror with social commentary, aligning it with recent entries like Get Out, The Purge, and Happy Death Day. Like those films, it uses its genre framework to critique cultural issues, generational divides, social decay, and the tension between progress and tradition. It doesn't reach the psychological complexity of Get Out or the satire of The Purge, but it clearly aspires to say something about the world while still delivering visceral thrills. In tone and execution, it also bears resemblance to Netflix's Fear Street trilogy, which reimagines slasher conventions with a contemporary sensibility and layered storytelling. Both works appeal to audiences who grew up on horror classics but crave emotional depth and stylistic flair. However, Clown in a Cornfield keeps its narrative tighter and less episodic, prioritizing tension over mythology. It feels more self-contained, which works in its favor when aiming for pure suspense. In terms of direction and visual style, Clown in a Cornfield can be compared to films like It Follows and The Black Phone, where mood and atmosphere take precedence over relentless gore. Like those movies, it uses lighting, camera movement, and silence to generate fear rather than relying solely on jump scares. This approach demonstrates a more sophisticated understanding of horror mechanics and gives the film a timeless quality that separates it from cheap slasher imitators. Where the movie falters slightly is in originality. For all its skillful execution, seasoned horror fans will recognize many familiar beats: the sudden deaths, the final showdown, and the archetypes of victims and survivors. It does not fully reinvent the wheel, but rather polishes it for a new generation. Compared to more subversive entries like Cabin in the Woods or Midsommar, it feels safer and more traditional. Yet, this restraint also allows it to remain accessible and effective for mainstream audiences. Looking at the director's influences, There's a clear appreciation for the craftsmanship of John Carpenter, the suspense mastery of Alfred Hitchcock, and even the teen-focused tension of Kevin Williamson's scripts. Each influence can be felt in different moments: Carpenter's slow-burn pacing, Hitchcock's framing for psychological impact, and Williamson's sharp dialogue that humanizes the victims. This blend of inspirations gives Clown in a Cornfield its cinematic texture, bridging classic and modern sensibilities. In the broader cinematic conversation, Clown in a Cornfield stands as a reflection of where horror has evolved, a genre now defined not just by blood and fear, but by atmosphere, meaning, and emotional engagement. It is not as revolutionary as the films it nods to, but it understands the language of horror well enough to speak fluently to today's audiences. Ultimately, its strength lies in refinement rather than reinvention. By skillfully weaving together nostalgia, modern pacing, and thematic ambition, it earns its place among the more respectable contemporary horror titles. It may not outdo its legendary predecessors, but it honors them while carving out a distinctive voice that keeps the genre alive and relevant for a new era. Clown in a Cornfield uses symbolism and metaphor as tools to deepen its story beyond surface-level scares, embedding meaning into objects, colors, and repeated imagery that connect directly to its characters and themes. Beneath the violent chaos lies a carefully constructed visual language that reflects fear, guilt, change, and moral decay. Every element, from the clown mask to the cornfield itself, functions as a symbol designed to give the film a resonance that lingers long after the final frame. The clown, as the title suggests, is the central symbol. Traditionally associated with laughter and innocence, here it becomes a grotesque inversion of that image, a face of distorted joy masking cruelty and vengeance. The clown mask worn by the killer becomes a metaphor for hidden darkness, both personal and societal. It represents the facades people maintain to hide their true intentions, a visual embodiment of hypocrisy in a town that outwardly seems wholesome but harbors deep resentment and moral corruption. When the killer dons the clown mask, it is not just to frighten but to expose the idea that behind civility often lies chaos. The cornfield itself is another powerful metaphor, representing concealment, isolation, and the illusion of safety. Cornfields in American horror often symbolize the intersection of rural innocence and buried violence. They are places where visibility is limited, where danger hides in plain sight, and where order dissolves into primal fear. In Clown in a Cornfield, the cornfield becomes a living maze that traps the characters physically and emotionally. It mirrors the moral confusion of the town, where good and evil blur and where every stalk of corn could hide a secret or a threat. The recurring imagery of the harvest further reinforces this idea. Harvesting is supposed to represent growth, reward, and the cycle of life, but in this story, it becomes a metaphor for reckoning, the idea that past sins eventually demand a harvest of consequences. The killer's rampage functions as this twisted reaping, a moral harvest where hypocrisy and neglect are paid back with blood. The film subtly uses color to carry symbolic meaning as well. Red, unsurprisingly, dominates the palette, representing not just violence but exposure, truth spilling out like blood. The use of stark white, particularly in costume or lighting during moments of false calm, contrasts with that red to represent denial and repression. The moment red intrudes upon white, visually or narratively, signals the collapse of the character's illusions. The clown's bright colors, red, yellow, and blue, also symbolize corrupted innocence. They are colors of childhood toys and carnival fun, yet here they are drenched in shadow and fear, underscoring how something meant to entertain can transform into something monstrous. The duality of the clown's colors reflects the duality within the town itself. What appears playful and normal is, underneath, fractured and decaying. Mirrors and reflections appear sparingly but meaningfully throughout the film, serving as metaphors for self-confrontation. When characters look into mirrors, they often face not just their image but their guilt and fear. The mirror moments are not random, they occur at points of emotional turning, reminding viewers that the external horror is tied to internal reckoning. In a broader sense, the film's setting, an American small town, acts as a metaphor for the nation's moral crossroads. It represents tradition, pride, and community but also denial, stagnation, and suppression of change. The decaying structures, fading murals, and broken neon signs of the town all echo a larger metaphor about decline, how communities rot from within when they cling too tightly to the past. Another subtle but recurring metaphor is the idea of masks beyond the literal clown mask. Many characters metaphorically wear masks of conformity, politeness, or rebellion, each hiding insecurities and contradictions. The killer simply externalizes what everyone else is already doing emotionally. When characters finally drop their masks, They reveal both vulnerability and truth, often moments before tragedy strikes. Even the use of silence in the film carries symbolic weight. Silence follows chaos like a shadow, representing emptiness and the absence of innocence. After moments of intense violence, the sudden quiet feels haunting, symbolizing not relief but realization, the emptiness left when fear and vengeance consume everything. The motif of the corn swaying in the wind returns repeatedly, acting as a metaphor for inevitability. The wind stirs the stalks like whispers of fate, suggesting that the events unfolding were always meant to happen, that the town's hidden sins would always resurface. It ties the narrative to a kind of cyclical justice, nature's own rhythm reclaiming what humans tried to bury. In sum, the film's symbolic structure is not accidental. Each metaphor, from the clown's mask to the cornfield's maze, works to deepen the central idea that evil often grows from denial and repression. Clown in a Cornfield uses these layers of visual and thematic symbolism to ensure its horror resonates beyond its scares. It becomes not just a story about a killer in a mask but a reflection of collective guilt, moral blindness, and the darkness that festers beneath the surface of ordinary life. For an attentive audience, these metaphors transform what could have been a straightforward slasher into a chilling meditation on what hides behind the masks we all wear. Clown in a Cornfield exists at an interesting intersection between contemporary slasher cinema and the long legacy of American small-town horror. While it is not officially part of a cinematic franchise yet, the film's source material, a popular young adult horror novel by Adam Cesare, already lays the groundwork for potential sequels. The novel itself is part of a trilogy, followed by Clown in a Cornfield 2, Frendo Lives and Clown in a Cornfield 3, The Church of Frendo. These sequels continue exploring the same universe, expanding its lore and deepening its critique of generational divides, small-town politics, and moral decay. The film adaptation, therefore, sits within this larger literary context and carries the responsibility of introducing new audiences to Cesare's twisted yet socially aware horror world. From a franchise perspective, the movie functions as both a standalone slasher and a potential launch point for future installments. The filmmakers have intentionally planted subtle references and Easter eggs that suggest a broader mythology surrounding the clown figure, Frendo. His identity, while seemingly explained by the end of the film, leaves enough ambiguity to allow multiple interpretations or future revelations. This mirrors how many classic horror icons, such as Michael Myers, Ghostface, and Pennywise, were initially designed for single films but evolved into recurring symbols of fear over decades. Clown in a Cornfield follows that lineage closely, with Frendo serving as both a literal killer and a metaphorical embodiment of social and generational anger. The tone and structure of the movie also acknowledge its genre heritage. It draws clear inspiration from 1970s and 1980s slashers like Halloween, Friday the 13th, and My Bloody Valentine, where rural or suburban communities become battlegrounds for moral panic and suppressed violence. However, it updates those familiar tropes for modern sensibilities, integrating social media culture, economic anxiety, and intergenerational resentment into the story. This mixture of nostalgia and modern commentary positions Clown in a Cornfield as both homage and reinvention. For longtime horror fans, there are visual and narrative callbacks that act as rewards for close viewers. The slow tracking shots through dark cornfields recall the voyeuristic cinematography of John Carpenter's early work. The masked killer's near-silent presence feels like a tribute to classic horror villains who rely on atmosphere rather than exposition. Even the film structure, a slow build to explosive violence followed by a chase-heavy third act, mirrors traditional slasher rhythms while integrating sharper character development and social critique. In terms of thematic continuity, if a franchise develops from this film, it will likely expand on the concept of Frendo as a cultural symbol. In the novel's sequels, Frendo evolves from a singular killer into a viral idea, representing collective anger, revenge, and rebellion. This opens up cinematic possibilities similar to how the Purge franchise transformed from a home invasion thriller into a societal commentary series. The same trajectory could easily apply to Clown in a Cornfield, with future films exploring different towns or generations affected by the same underlying fear. Historically, the film also connects to America's fascination with the small-town mythos, the illusion of safety, tradition, and purity that hides darker truths. Many horror classics use this setting to critique nostalgia and the dangers of clinging to outdated ideals. Clown in a Cornfield continues that tradition, positioning its town, Kettle Springs, as a microcosm of American discontent. Its conflicts between older citizens and the younger generation echo real-world cultural divides over progress, morality, and belonging. While not based on true events, The film feels grounded in social reality, using exaggerated horror to comment on familiar anxieties. From a production standpoint, Clown in a Cornfield also reflects the recent resurgence of elevated horror, where genre films are treated with artistic seriousness and thematic depth. Like Get Out or The Babadook, it balances scares with subtext, though it remains more traditional in its slasher roots. This balance allows it to appeal both to genre purists and newer audiences looking for meaning behind the mayhem. If sequels follow the trajectory of the books, they will likely expand the timeline, addressing how the trauma from the original massacre reverberates through the survivors and new victims. This continuity could transform the franchise into a generational horror saga, much like Scream or It, where myth and memory intertwine. The potential for interconnected storytelling is strong, given the film's layered symbolism and open-ended conclusion. Ultimately, Clown in a Cornfield occupies a fascinating space between homage and innovation. It stands as both a tribute to classic slashers and a reflection of modern America's fractured identity. Whether it grows into a larger franchise or remains a standalone statement, it captures the essence of how horror evolves, by echoing the past while confronting the fears of the present. The historical and thematic context surrounding the story gives it weight beyond its immediate thrills, suggesting that the seeds of future installments, like the Cornfield itself, are already planted, waiting for the right moment to grow into something even darker and more expansive. Clown in a Cornfield stands out as a prime example of a mid-budget horror production that balances creative ambition with financial restraint. While official figures for its production budget have not been publicly released, industry estimates place it within the range of $10 to $15 million, aligning with other contemporary horror releases that favor smart resource management over blockbuster extravagance. The result is a film that looks significantly richer than its cost might suggest, thanks to intelligent allocation of funds, practical effects, and a reliance on atmosphere rather than expensive digital spectacle. Much of the film's visual success stems from its strategic use of real-world locations instead of costly studio sets. The rural environment, particularly the vast cornfields and small-town settings, provides a naturally cinematic backdrop that requires minimal artificial dressing. By filming in actual agricultural areas and abandoned town spaces, the production achieves an authentic texture that grounds the story in realism while keeping location expenses manageable. This choice not only enhances immersion but also supports the movie's thematic focus on rural decay and generational tension, proving that budget efficiency can align perfectly with narrative intent. The cinematography, lighting, and practical makeup work also show a deliberate effort to stretch every dollar. Instead of relying heavily on computer-generated imagery, the filmmakers used old-school effects and clever camera techniques to create suspense and shock. This practical approach not only gives the violence a tangible edge but also reinforces the slasher genre's gritty aesthetic, reminiscent of classic horror films that built fear through suggestion and craft rather than massive budgets. In this sense, the movie's relatively modest financial resources become a creative strength, forcing the filmmakers to rely on ingenuity and tone over spectacle. Marketing played a significant role in how Clown in a Cornfield reached audiences. The studio adopted a targeted release strategy that blended digital promotion with limited theatrical runs. Early teasers and trailers emphasized the film's connection to Adam Cesare's best-selling novel, which already had a dedicated fanbase. This pre-existing audience provided an organic foundation for buzz, amplified by online horror communities and social media platforms. Instead of spending tens of millions on traditional advertising, the marketing leaned into viral content, influencer reviews, and word of mouth, methods that have proven highly effective for genre films like Smile and Barbarian. These grassroots tactics generated anticipation without the burden of massive marketing costs, allowing the movie to build momentum gradually rather than relying solely on opening weekend hype. When evaluating the film's financial performance, it's important to consider modern release models. With many horror films now debuting simultaneously in theaters and on streaming platforms, box office numbers alone no longer define success. While Clown in a Cornfield's theatrical debut may not have broken records, it reportedly achieved strong returns relative to its budget, particularly when factoring in digital rentals, streaming deals, and international licensing. Horror remains one of the most reliable genres for profitability due to its loyal fan base and low production-to-return ratio, and this film fits squarely within that tradition. In terms of box office trends, Clown in a Cornfield benefited from the growing appetite for socially aware horror. Its thematic undercurrents, exploring generational divides, moral hypocrisy, and the dark side of nostalgia, gave critics and audiences more to talk about than just scares. Positive word of mouth and solid audience retention help sustain its earnings beyond opening weekend, a key indicator of success for smaller budget releases. Furthermore, the film's ability to maintain strong streaming performance post-theatrical release suggests a healthy long-term revenue stream. Compared to similarly budgeted horror hits such as The Black Phone, Ready or Not, and Talk to Me, Clown in a Cornfield performs competitively, achieving high audience engagement with significantly lower production expenses. The absence of A-list stars also contributed to cost control, allowing more budget to be devoted to set design, practical effects, and marketing flexibility. This decision worked in the film's favor since fresh faces often enhance believability in horror and make the story feel more immediate. The film's production efficiency and return potential also set it up for franchise viability. Should sequels move forward, the foundation laid by this film's box office and streaming success would make future installments easier to greenlight. Horror franchises often thrive when the first film performs modestly well and builds cult status over time, a pattern already forming around Clown in a Cornfield as fans discuss its symbolism and tease sequel possibilities. From a purely economic perspective, the movie punches above its weight class. Every dollar is visible on screen, yet nothing feels overproduced or wasteful. The rural aesthetic, the moody lighting, and the practical gore effects make the film feel authentic and handmade, a quality that both horror aficionados and casual viewers appreciate. In an industry often dominated by excessive spending, Clown in a Cornfield demonstrates that creativity and precision can outshine spectacle. Ultimately, while it may not rival blockbuster numbers, the film's smart budgeting, steady revenue across multiple platforms, and strong audience engagement make it a financial and artistic success story. It proves once again that horror, when executed with intelligence and passion, can deliver both critical and commercial rewards without the need for an inflated budget. Clown in a Cornfield stands as a testament to resourceful filmmaking, showing that the true measure of cinematic value lies not in dollars spent, but in the emotional and visual impact achieved on screen. Clown in a Cornfield is the kind of film that thrives on atmosphere, pacing, and tension, making the way you choose to watch it an important part of the overall experience. Whether you prefer the immersion of a theater, the intimacy of a home setup, or the flexibility of streaming, this movie adapts remarkably well to each viewing environment while maintaining its unsettling tone and suspense. For those who can still catch it in theaters, seeing Clown in a Cornfield on the big screen offers the most complete sensory experience. The cinematography, especially the wide shots of endless cornfields and the eerie use of shadow and light, benefits greatly from the scale and darkness of a theater setting. The immersive surround sound enhances every rustle, scream, and ambient hum, pulling the audience deeper into the isolation that defines the story. Horror films often gain power when shared with an audience, and this one is no exception. The collective reactions, gasps, nervous laughter, and the tense silence before each scare add to the energy. Watching it in a theater gives the film's visual and auditory design room to breathe, emphasizing how its slow burn pacing escalates into chaos. The film's midsection, which balances character development with rising dread, feels especially potent in a theatrical context where distractions are minimal and immersion is total. However, Clown in a Cornfield also translates exceptionally well to home viewing, particularly for audiences who enjoy dissecting horror details at their own pace. On a well-calibrated TV or projector with solid sound, the film retains most of its atmospheric weight. The key is to recreate as much of that cinematic darkness and sound clarity as possible. Dim the lights, turn off notifications, and use quality speakers or headphones to capture the subtleties of the score and sound design. The movie's use of silence and sudden noise shifts loses much of its punch without proper audio balance, so investing in a good setup is worth it. Thematically and visually, this film is intimate enough to reward focused home viewing. Unlike large-scale blockbusters, it doesn't rely on massive spectacle or heavy CGI. Its horror grows from tension, shadow, and suggestion, all of which translate perfectly to a controlled environment. If you're someone who enjoys pausing to catch visual clues, thematic hints, or foreshadowing, home viewing offers the advantage of analysis. The movie's layers of symbolism, from the recurring imagery of the clown mask to the subtle town decay, become easier to appreciate when you can slow things down. As for streaming, Clown in a Cornfield's release strategy ensures broad accessibility for American audiences. After its theatrical window, the film found its way to major video-on-demand and subscription platforms, where its replay value shines. Streaming allows for convenience and comfort, ideal for late-night horror marathons or casual weekend viewing. It's a film that invites both solitary watching for maximum tension and group viewing for shared thrills. Watching with friends, either physically or via online watch parties, often enhances the experience since the movie's escalating violence and twists provoke real-time reactions and discussion. In terms of viewing format, high-definition or 4K versions are the best way to appreciate the film's cinematography. The muted color grading, fog-drenched exteriors, and flickering lighting effects are integral to its visual identity. Standard definition streams or compressed versions can flatten the imagery and reduce the film's immersive qualities, especially in darker scenes. For that reason, streaming on a large screen with proper resolution and contrast will bring out the subtle textures of the cornfield sequences and the ominous shadows that haunt the film's tone. For those who prefer ownership or offline viewing, digital rental or Blu-ray options offer additional value. Physical media releases often include behind-the-scenes features, commentary tracks, and insights into production design and direction. These extras deepen appreciation for the craftsmanship behind the horror, showing how practical effects and careful lighting choices create the illusion of a much bigger budget. Fans of the source novel will also find these bonus materials informative, as they reveal how the adaptation interprets and condenses Cesare's narrative for screen pacing. From a contextual standpoint, Clown in a Cornfield works differently depending on how you watch it. In a theater, it's an intense communal horror experience that amplifies fear and adrenaline. At home, it becomes more reflective and thematic, allowing time to observe how symbolism and character arcs intertwine. On streaming, it's flexible and accessible, perfect for both first-time viewers and rewatchers looking to catch the details they missed the first time. Each viewing context offers something distinct: scale, intimacy, or convenience, but all preserve the movie's core emotional impact. Ultimately, the best way to experience Clown in a Cornfield depends on what kind of horror viewer you are. If you thrive on suspense and want the loudest, most immersive experience, theaters provide the ultimate version. If you enjoy slow-burning dread and detail-oriented storytelling, a dark, quiet home setup with good sound is the way to go. And if accessibility and comfort matter most, streaming ensures that the terror of Kettle Springs is only a few clicks away. No matter the setting, the film delivers its intended effect, a balance of fear, tension, and reflection, making Clown in a Cornfield a rare horror release that adapts perfectly to every format without losing its bite. If you enjoyed this video and would like us to provide reviews of every kind of movie, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video.
Goodbye.